I gotta be careful the way I say this. They're gonna try to ethnically cleanse Gaza.
Yep.
I mean, I don't use that term lightly. Okay.
The tragic end of Charlie Kirk reveals something profound about American politics and foreign influence. Let me explain. Charlie Kirk was one of America's most influential conservative voices, a prominent right-wing activist, devoted Trump supporter. He played a critical role in getting Trump re-elected. At just 31 years old, he had become a powerful force in American right-wing politics, mobilizing millions of young Americans through his media platform and political organization, Turning Point USA. He popularized right-wing ideologies amongst the younger generation. Kirk was a Christian Zionist, someone who believes that supporting America's sacred cow, you know who that is a biblical mandate, a religious requirement for Christians. This belief system, common among evangelical Christians, holds that the establishment of the Untouchable State in 1948 was the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. To understand his reach, Kirk wasn't just another podcaster. He had built a political machine that could influence elections and shape the future of American conservatism. But here's what's crucial to understand. America's sacred cow is losing the propaganda war, especially among young Americans, young white Americans. The numbers are stark. Among Republicans over 50, many still support the Untouchable State. But among Republicans under 50, the future of American conservatism, the majority are now critical of this state's actions. This demographic shift terrifies leadership because American support is existential for survival. Without American diplomatic protection, military aid, and weapons, they could not survive a month in that region. And this is where Charlie Kirk's story becomes fascinating. Despite being one of the Untouchable State's most reliable American supporters, cracks began to appear in his unwavering support. After October 7th, Kirk started asking uncomfortable questions, let's say. He questioned how the most surveilled piece of land on Earth could be breached for 6 hours before the first responders actually came, wondering if there was a stand-down order. Listen to what he says.
When I first heard this story, I still had the same gut instinct that I did initially. I find this very hard to believe. I've been to that Gaza border. You cannot go 10 feet without running into a 19-year-old with an AR-15 or an automatic machine gun that is an IDF soldier, right? The whole country is surveilled. Was there a stand-down order? 6 hours? I don't believe it. Israel's the size of New Jersey. When I took a helicopter ride from Jerusalem to the Gaza border, it's 45 minutes.
Wow.
6 hours. They're live streaming the killing of Jews. Did somebody in the government say stand down? That is a legitimate, non-conspiracy question. The whole country is the IDF. The whole country is.
Yeah.
And you're trying to tell me that they're going to concerts and kibbutzes and schools and by reports 6 hours. Let's say it's 3 hours.
Was there a stand-down order? That is a legitimate, non-conspiracy question. But Kirk went even further than that. In his interview with Megyn Kelly, Kirk discussed Epstein's connections to the Untouchable State spy agency, speculating that Epstein might have been an asset, an agent, running blackmail operations against American politicians.
Also, with respect to, you and I speculated about this at the Turning Point event, whether the possibility of Jeffrey Epstein possibly being a Mossad agent or asset or affiliated with.
Now, this raises a disturbing question. We can see that the leader of this untouchable state, let's call him the untouchable leader, he has become so brazen in his actions, seemingly able to manipulate even Trump. The answer might lie in those very Epstein files that Kirk was discussing. Files that could contain compromising information on powerful American leaders. Now, for America's sacred cow, Kirk discussing this was crossing a red line. The untouchable leader obsessively monitors what's said about his untouchable state, even by close allies. Look how quickly he criticizes Australia's Prime Minister whenever Australia deviates even a little from their position on any issue. If he can't tolerate minor policy differences from allied governments, how would he react to someone with Kirk's influence exposing potential intelligence operations against American politicians? The response was swift and brutal. Kirk described receiving dozens of angry text messages from wealthy donors calling him names, despite the fact that he was learning Hebrew and writing a book about the Sabbath. Kirk explained, "I have less ability sometimes online to criticize this particular government without backlash than actual citizens of that country do. And that's really, really weird."
It goes to the point where if, for example, if I have less ability sometimes online to criticize the Israeli government without backlash than actual Israelis do.
He was being told by powerful donors, you're not allowed to criticize them. You're either with us completely or you're against us.
It is all of a sudden, oh, Charlie is he's no longer with us and all that. I said, wait a second, what do you mean? What does with us mean exactly, right? I'm an American, okay? Like, I represent this country.
Think about that for a moment. In America, you can criticize America and face no serious consequences. You can criticize American presidents, American military actions. That's considered normal political discourse. But criticizing America's sacred cow, that could make you lose everything. You could be labeled as an anti-you-know-what. You could lose your funding, lose your platform, lose your career, and dare I say it, lose your life. This isn't just happening in America. In Australia, there's an active push to outlaw any criticism of this sacred, untouchable state. The IHRA definition is being pushed as law in various countries, including Australia. It's already been adopted by many universities, effectively banning legitimate criticism of this state's policies. This is bizarre and quite frankly dangerous. When one foreign nation becomes so untouchable that even questioning their actions is treated as hate speech, we've crossed a line that threatens free speech itself. There's no free speech if you can't criticize the actions of another state. Here's what made this moment so dangerous for America's sacred cow. Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, arguably two of the most influential right-wing political commentators, had already broken ranks, becoming fierce critics of their actions. Now, Charlie Kirk, the golden boy who had dedicated his career to defend the untouchable state, was starting to ask the same uncomfortable questions. If Kirk had fully turned against them, it would have created an unstoppable avalanche. The three most influential voices in American conservatism, all questioning the narrative that had dominated American politics for decades. For the untouchable leader, watching their support crumble among young Americans, this was his worst nightmare coming true. Then came September 10th. Charlie Kirk was shot with surgical precision. A single bullet to the neck from a rooftop position, about 130 meters in distance, over a crowd of hundreds into a tent. The shot was so precise, it severed his jugular vein instantly. But here's what raises questions. How could a young college student shoot with such precision? This wasn't a random spray of bullets or a close-range attack. This was a single, precise shot to the neck from a rooftop position, the kind of accuracy that suggests professional training of a sniper rather than an amateur. The alleged perpetrator was reportedly a young man, yet the level of skill required suggests something far more sophisticated than an angry young college student. America's sacred cow is in crisis mode as images of starving children and bombed hospitals flood social media. Global opinion has shifted dramatically against them. International organizations are using strong language about their actions, the G word. Even their most loyal allies are beginning to turn away in disgust. But there's one lifeline they cannot afford to lose: American support. While lobbying groups can still pressure politicians through donations, they're watching their most crucial asset slip away: grassroots American public opinion. Without that popular support, politicians face intense opposition from their own constituents, making it politically toxic to justify sending billions of taxpayer dollars in aid to this untouchable state. Charlie Kirk, with his massive platform and influence over young Americans, represented either their greatest asset or their greatest threat, should he ever turn or become more vocal. The signs were pointing toward the latter. In her tribute to Kirk, Candace Owens, who was his close friend, if anyone knew Charlie Kirk, it was Candace Owens. They basically grew this movement together. Turning Point USA, they basically grew that together.
People thought that when I had made up my mind about Israel, that Charlie and me fell apart. Nope, never, not for a second. I said, it's the easiest decision ever, because Charlie knew who I was and I knew who he was. I said, Charlie, this is where I'm at, and there's no room for movement. And you tell your whoever that needs to hear it, whatever you need to tell them, because we're always going to be brothers and sisters. I think in the end, Charlie was going through a spiritual transformation. I don't think it, I know it. He was going through a lot, and there was a lot of pressure. And it's hard for me to watch the people who were pressuring him, I don't know, just say the things that they're saying. You know, there's something about it that just feels really fake to me. And they would have allowed him to lose and wanted him to lose everything for changing or even slightly modifying an opinion. And then to see them doing what they're doing today, it's hurtful to me. It's very hurtful to me.
She says that, I think Charlie was going through a spiritual transformation. He was going through a lot. There was a lot of pressure. Kirk wasn't completely changed yet. He was still supporting this untouchable state on many issues, but something was shifting. His America First beliefs were starting to clash with blind support for America's sacred cow. He was beginning to ask simple but dangerous questions, like, why should America put the interests of this untouchable state before their own? And now all of a sudden it's, oh, Charlie, he's no longer with us. Wait a second. Charlie's saying, what does with us exactly mean? What does with us mean exactly? I'm an American, he says. I represent this country. This is exactly what they fear most. Americans who put their own country first. And it's the same pattern we see here in Australia. The Sacred Cows lobby wants our politicians to put their interests before Australia's own. For these backers, whether in America or Australia, even this shift towards putting your own country first is completely unacceptable. She goes on to describe how these forces wanted Kirk to lose everything for changing or even slightly modifying an opinion. This is the reality of foreign influence in American politics. Total compliance is demanded. Even slight deviation is met with character destruction, financial pressure, and as we've tragically seen, perhaps something far worse. Charlie Kirk's story reveals a disturbing pattern. A prominent supporter starts asking uncomfortable questions about October 7th and Epstein's connections to the Untouchable State spy agency. He faces intense pressure from wealthy donors. He begins prioritizing American interests over the Untouchable State's demands. Then he meets a tragic end with professional precision. But here's what's equally telling. Look at what happened next. Certain agitators immediately seized on Kirk's death, turning him into a martyr for their cause. Various influencers, provocateurs, troublemakers are using Kirk's tragic end to rally support for extreme far-right ideologies and spark anti-immigration marches worldwide.
Our friend Charlie Kirk getting murdered in cold blood this week, and people on the left celebrating it openly. People have no choice. You're in a fundamental situation here where whether you choose violence or not, violence is coming to you. You either fight back or you die.
It's the perfect distraction. Instead of us talking about ongoing conflicts like the G word that's happening in a certain place, suddenly everyone's focused on domestic issues and Kirk's martyrdom. The very people Kirk was beginning to question are now using his death to advance their agenda. We may never know who was responsible for Charlie Kirk's death, but we can see who had the most to lose from his transformation and his shift in rhetoric, and who's benefiting most from the aftermath. What do you think about the timing of these events? Share your thoughts below. If you want more analysis like this, then subscribe to The Balanced Narrative. We ask questions that others won't. Hit the subscribe and the bell. There's much more to uncover.
سبيل الدموع سبيل مريح تنهدى يا صاحي كي تستريح وبث الدعاء الخفي الصريح يسعك الفضاء الرحيب الفسيح